Greetings, everybody. It's great to be with you again. We're picking up on the State of the American Traveller and looking in particular at traveller sentiment. So my name's Chris Adams. I look after research and insights at Miles Partnership, and Dave Braddon, our very good friend, a destination analyst, is going to join us. And you've been tracking traveller sentiment for many years.
Yes, we have, Chris, since 2006 when we started the State of the American Traveller. And, we've been working with you on this project for many, many years as a partner. Those of you who know the project, we do the State of the American Traveller survey every 3 months with Miles. We conduct an online survey of a representative sample of American leisure travelers, 2,000 in total. And we ask all sorts of questions about different topics, timely stuff. And this particular wave, we looked at destination management issues, but as always, we look at traveler sentiment as well. We track how people are feeling about their upcoming travels. And I'm going to share a little data with you today about that. Two of the standard questions we ask deal with the number of trips people expect to take in the upcoming year and the amount they expect to spend on leisure travel in the upcoming year, all compared to the previous year. So let's look at that data real quickly. And first, we'll start at the people's expectation for trips, which right now about 38.1% of people expect to increase their travels, Americans that is, expect to increase their travels in the upcoming year compared to last year. 35.9% expect to spend more on leisure travel than they did last year. So that sounds good, but it really needs to be put into context in terms of a time series of data, how it compares to the past. So let's look at the first piece of data, expected trips. And what you see here is from the winter of 2015 till the fall of this year, the percent of American leisure travelers who expect to travel more, that is to take more trips this year than they did in the past 12 months. And what you can see that the most recent survey, as I said, 38.1% of us expect to increase the number of trips we take. It's kind of an interesting data series in that if you look only at the fall wave, it tends to be very strong. It's a very seasonal thing we see here. And the summer tends to be weak. And you can see that too if you look back a few years. And one of the interesting things we note in this data is if you look back at 2016, the fall moving into 2017, we had some increase. We had strong feelings about future travel in America and stronger expectations for the next year. In the following year, it flattened out, and in this year, it's been declining. So, and we've seen this in the number of statistics we look at that throughout this year, there's been some weakness. But the good news is that in the fall wave, it's bounced back up, and we have some strength right now. What's to come, we don't know, and I'm going to share some data with you in a minute that might give you a little hint as to what to expect. Let's look at expected spending in the next year, and we see a very similar pattern. If we look at the fall wave, it tends to be fairly strong. A couple of years ago, we had some growth throughout the year. The year before last, last year, excuse me, it was fairly flat. And this year, it decreased again, just like the trip expectations we talked about. But the number of people who expect to spend more on travel has popped up and has some strength right now. So another metric we look at is the number of trips people report having taken. And you can see this chart here shows from the spring of 2016 to now, how many on average trips of 50 miles or more one way from home people took during the past year. It averages out to be about 4, but during this period we've had some weakness, and you can see especially in the last couple of years, rather precipitous drop in the number of trips we've been taking. But the good news is over the last 3 waves, or the 2 waves, we've seen a jump up. And that's all interesting. But if we look at the long-term average, the 4-year average from 16 to 19, we can see that the typical person takes about 4 trips per year. And we're a little bit below that norm over the last few years, but moving upward as we've seen. So that's a good and bad news scenario, I think. Now, the final piece of data I want to share with you comes from a question where we ask people to think about their spending in the next year, how they're going to budget their income, and how important leisure travel will be in that budgeting process. And what you see here are the percent of American leisure travelers who say leisure travel will be a budget priority from extremely high priority to extremely low priority. And about a third, a little under a third, 27.3% of us say, well, it's going to be a high or extremely high priority. And that's right now. This was taken a month and a half ago. And so if we compare it, though, to a year ago, we see a little bit of a different story. This is the 27.6% I showed you before. Last year at this time, it was at 33.8%. So we see a little bit of weakening in terms of the proportion of us that expect to consider leisure travel a high budget priority in the upcoming year. So just as a quick overview of what we see in this data, first of all, the signals seem to be fairly mixed and fairly consistent with what we see in overall economic statistics right now. There's some really good stuff going on. There's some not so good stuff going on, and it's not really clear where we're going to be going in the future. There's some weakness in travel optimism earlier in the parts of the year, but as I showed you, it's following its traditional seasonal path and solidified this year in terms of the number of trips people expect to take and spending as well. Leisure travel volume has rebounded slightly in the last few periods here, but yet it's still a little bit below the recent average. And finally, travel as a budget priority has slipped a bit this fall. So again, mixed signals, and it'll be really interesting to see how things play out as we move into 2020.
But I think it's prudent to say, Dave, in the context of some of the macro regional sort of themes and trends we're seeing, whether it's trade disputes or the unsettled sort of international and political environment, that it's probably smart to have a look at your 2020 marketing plans and think about plan B if there is some sort of slowdown or correction, because we've really seen historically long expansion of travel and tourism. I think it's now 100+ months when hotel occupancy rates and ADRs have been improving. We've never seen that before in the history of records in the travel space. So a plan B is probably a prudent move.
Yeah, it's interesting. The overall economy has shown the same thing. We've been in an extraordinarily long period of expansion, if not a particularly robust period of expansion, and the industry has followed it in many ways. We have seen a worldwide boom in travel over the last 5 years, with outbound leisure travel just going through the roof, as you know. But the economy seems to be plodding along. We're definitely not in a recession. We're doing okay, not exceedingly well, but most of the economists out there expect that GDP will continue to grow at a moderate rate next year. But again, it's always good to be safe because we don't know. We just don't know.
That's right. But the long-term prospects for travel and tourism remain strong. Younger generations in particular really prioritize travel in their budgets and their expectations, and they're often spending proportionately more of their income on travel and experiences versus, say, goods or even housing than previous generations. Plus, airline connectivity is expanding. So there's some really good overall news.
Yeah, indeed.
So, okay, well, thank you very much, Dave. Just a reminder to everybody, the November the 20th webinar, which Dave mentioned, was on destination management. Some really compelling insights about what US travelers think about issues of sustainability to climate change and beyond, plus some of the early results of a DMO survey we did. You can see the webinar recording, the research, and the slides all available at both of our websites right there. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll look forward to connecting with you at our next State of the American Traveller. Thank you.